I'm going to start this video by telling you that I'm going to the barber tomorrow, which is of course the most pressing issue. But I talked to my mom yesterday and my hair is wrong. She doesn't like the way that I'm parting it and it looks too flat. Sorry, Mom. Um, but yeah, it's time I go to the barber. So that's going to happen. I've been holding out because I've been in quarantine and my barber is an old man, probably 80 years old, who leaves soccer on the television the whole time in a very, very small barber shop in an indoor mall. And he cuts my hair with a straight razor. Not all of my hair, but he does probably a third of his hair cutting with a straight razor. Very, very old school, which I love. He's a nice guy, and he's very focused on his work. So I always like getting my hair cut with him. But he hasn't been going to work since the pandemic started. And we were in quarantine for a long time, so I couldn't go anyway. And then finally, when we were allowed to go get our hair cut again, and I already had a mane, I went, and he wasn't there. And the people in the shop next door said that he hasn't been showing up. So I've kind of been holding out for my barber, but I don't think he's going to show up. So I have to go find a new place, at least for now, which is heartbreaking. But it is clearly necessary. I can't even rein this in anymore. So that's where we are. But hair aside, today's question comes from talking to a friend of mine, Misha, who was talking to me about being in an astrology kick. So he's looking at lots of astrology right now, which if you only know like the newspaper version, well, who reads the newspaper now? If you only know like the surface version of astrology, it seems pretty crazy. I mean, it seems like, what are we talking about here? But it's pretty strange. I've even found it that if you start to look into the real details of it, like what do they call it? Like your natal chart, like what time you were born, and all of those things, it can get pretty specific. And I've seen it with a few friends where I've said, okay, that's not just like some general description that applies to everybody. It does seem a little bit more specific. So I keep an open mind to that and think, okay, sure, what's going on there? So my friend Misha was saying, I'm seeing a lot about myself in this sort of astrology, I think natal chart, reading about, personality traits. And he was saying, some of these traits that go with my chart are not positive or conscious traits, or they wouldn't seem so on the surface. I don't remember exactly which ones he told me about, but for example, I know that some signs can be considered attention-seeking or very focused on cleanliness and order. For example, there are many other personality traits that could show up. And so his question was, how do I come to consciousness? How do I become deeply awake if these personality traits that may seem like weaknesses, that they may seem like vices, are just who I am? And I love the question because it brings up a bigger question about, it is part of a bigger question about the relationship between the relative and the absolute. So we're all human beings in physical bodies with hair that we have to deal with, for example, and have different physical characteristics. And part of the characteristic of our form, right, of just being the individual person that we are, is our personality too, and all of the aspects of personality. And if you're in relationship, in a close friendship or in a romantic relationship, especially if you've been married for some time, you'll see that the person that you married or your close friend is just different from you. There are some fundamental differences of preference that are just so. And it's always an important thing in relating to other people to start to distinguish between what is just the nature of this person that may be different from me, and what is something that may be unconscious in them, maybe something that they can work on, right? And it's the same for yourself. So what is just who I am, of my habits, of the things that I feel that I prefer, of, the things that I think that I need to feel like life is working for me. For example, my husband prefers a lot more order than I do. So is that a need that he has that's authentic, or is that a hang-up that he needs to work through? And that's always a big question in awakening. Is this trait that I'm seeing in myself just who I am, or is it a hang-up that I can let go of? And one that came for me that was very similar growing up was being gay. So I thought, okay, is this, because I grew up Catholic, which does not see being gay as, the Catholic Church does not see being gay as just part of who you are. They see that as a hang-up, officially still, right? That's not where our broader culture is, thank God, but it is where the church is. So that was a big question for me. Is this sexual orientation, is it an orientation? Is it just who I am? Or is it something that's wrong? Is it something that's coming from my childhood? Is it some complex that I have that I need to work through? Not a modern question at this point, but it was still relevant for me when I was growing up. I think a lot of people have this question on some level, and I certainly see that actively being worked out in the trans community right now, that collectively as a society, at least in North America and some other parts of the world, we are getting past that question of, is this a problem with the person, or is it just who they are? And we've accepted now, we understand now that you are just trans. That is who you are. There's nothing wrong with that. It is just what you are. And it's up to us to work through our problems with that. It's not up to you as a trans person to change. It's up to the rest of us to let go of our hang-ups. So that's kind of always the question. Where's the hang-up and where's just the natural reality? Who is, what traits are just inherent to you and to other people, and what traits are hang-ups, things that we have to work through. So it's pretty impossible to try to look around and decide absolutely, sort of doctrinally, what is so in yourself or in others. To just make a list of what's real in a person and what's not real in a person, in yourself or in others. It's a pretty dangerous game. Because, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, most of North American society would have said being trans is not natural. Of course, a lot of people would have known better, but the majority of the population would have said, no, this is unnatural, and they have to work through their issues. That's really dangerous because you're brutally marginalizing a group of people if you make that decision, and if you yourself are repressing your own nature, you're brutally marginalizing yourself. You're brutally repressing yourself. So it seems to me that the game of trying to discern and weed out what's real and what isn't in yourself or in others is one that is best not played. It seems that it is most direct just to look inward and sense a deeper authenticity behind the relativity. So what I mean by that is that no matter what your relative experience, no matter your gender, no matter your sexual orientation, no matter your astrological sign, no matter your habits, no matter your relative preferences, you are still a manifestation of consciousness. You are still an aspect of something much deeper. And that deeper dimension of what you are is universal and is so much less complicated than all of its manifestations, than all of the relativities. So when you sit in presence and experience the simplicity of this moment, there is an aliveness that is just so essential that it doesn't really bring up so many questions. It just is. And as you come more deeply into that awareness, not trying to rope it in with your mind, not worried about conceptually understanding it so much as you are just experiencing it, just knowing what it is through being it. The need to understand all of these relativities and control them dissipates gradually. So it seems that trying to mentally understand and categorize all these relativities is not so significant as coming into what you are, which is openness, which is acceptance. And through that openness, you settle into what you are on a relative level too. So to put it in more concrete terms, as I meditate, as I come into a deep self-awareness, and it may not happen through meditation, but as I look deeply into what I am on a simple level, there's space for me to act authentically, for me to just sort of sense naturally, easily, what feels right to me and what doesn't feel right to me. Not mentally, not morally, not moralistically, but just intuitively. Like, am I attracted to women? No. That question becomes much clearer the more I am in touch with myself. And being in touch with myself is ultimately not knowing myself as relativities, but being in touch with the awakeness, with the presence behind those relativities. So coming into that absolute simple experience of a self-nature beyond form, beyond your relative experience, beyond your gender, sexual orientation, astrological sign, preferences, coming into the experience of your essence beyond all those things gives you a space to perceive easily and naturally what is inherent to your form, and to just act naturally through that form, to be attracted to who you're attracted to experience the gender that you experience, and to realize that clearly, and just say, okay, that's great. Like, there's such beauty in the manifestation of divinity through infinite variety, and seeing yourself as a perfect divine manifestation, whatever your habits are. Even my husband's, what would seem to me excessive need for order sometimes, is completely natural for him. And I can see that it is very it's just his perception of reality. So I try to clean up more and try to accommodate that, because I see that it's just who he is. So as you ask this question, what's something that I'm hung up on and what's really just how I am, don't get too mixed up in that search. Just kind of let go of that relative question and keep looking into this deeper self-experience. And those relative questions have a way of settling, coming into clearer focus as you let them go and just come more simply and deeply into what you know yourself to be, into what you feel and sense that you are.